Hello and welcome to Bread of Life, a daily devotional program which each week features a different area pastor. Our speaker for this week is Pastor Cary Schmidt of Newington.
We're talking this week about making good calls, decisions that you can look back on and celebrate. And we said yesterday that the first quality of a good call is that it rests in God's sovereignty. Acts chapter 17, the Apostle Paul walked into a very pagan city, the city of Athens, and he began to see their superstitious religiosity, and he began to speak and teach and preach of Jesus Christ, an entirely new philosophy of the day. And as he did so, he was approached by two groups, the Epicureans and the Stoics, philosophers in the city of Athens. We said that the Epicureans were the equivalent of modern-day atheistic evolutionists or naturalists or secularists. Their motto would have been self-fulfillment. Their decision-making process would have been based purely on their passions, their emotions, their desires. What do I want? What feels good? The other group that approached him were the Stoics, and they were sort of the other end of the spectrum. They were the equivalent of a modern-day Buddhist or even someone that's steeped deeply into religious discipline, because the Stoics believed in tapping into a greater power and moving through life with endurance and self-discipline, being unmoved by emotions and passions. And so their motto would have been self-sufficiency, that virtue is its own reward and vice is its own punishment, kind of a modern-day karmic understanding. So the Stoics and the Epicureans, they came to Paul and said, teach us about this new way of thinking. Now, what does this have to do with your life today and the way you make decisions? Well, it's very simple, friend. You and I often are drawn into the same way of thinking. Sometimes we make our decisions based on what's best for me in this moment. How do I feel? What do I want? That's Epicurean. Other times we make decisions based on, how can I self-discipline my way forward? How can I save myself? And that is Stoicism, modern day Stoicism. And the Apostle Paul came in and he said something entirely different to these Athenian philosophers. He basically began by saying God is sovereign over all creation. God that made the world and all things therein, seeing he is Lord of heaven and earth. And so he basically said to these philosophers, look, you don't make God, I don't make God, he made me. Friend, as you stare, whatever you're worried about, or whatever burden you're dealing with, whatever decision you are up against, remember, God made you, God made the world in which you live, and all good decisions begin with understanding his absolute lordship of heaven and earth. The next thing the Apostle Paul said is that he is not just sovereign over creation, but that he is sovereign over every nation. In other words, I don't rule God, he rules me. Paul said that God hath made one blood of all nations of men for all to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed and the bounds of their habitation. Friend, when you turn on the evening news or when you understand the global events of our day, it can be dramatically unsettling. And so can I encourage you that God is not only in control of creation, he didn't just make all of creation, he is governing all of creation. And the movements of the nations are at his disposal. He truly is in control. The final thing that the Apostle Paul said to the philosophers of Athens is that God is sovereign, or should be sovereign, in my personal decisions. And it just makes sense, doesn't it? If he made creation, if he made me, if he governs all of the geopolitical events of the globe, then doesn't it make sense that I would want God, that wonderful, gracious, loving God, to lead me? I don't lead God, he leads me. And yet so often in my prayer life, in my quest for intimacy and relationship with God, I'm trying to put God in my debt. I'm trying to get God to submit to me instead of me submitting to him. And so, friend, I just want to conclude by saying your greatest decisions, your best calls, the ones you truly celebrate, always fall into submission to God's sovereignty. Follow him. Trust him today.
You've been listening to Pastor Cary Schmidt of Newington, and this has been Bread of Life, a program to encourage you from God's Word.